Happy holidays, happy new year, happy 2026. I don't know when it is you're watching this video. We're in a murky time of year where it's post-Christmas, it's before New Year's Day, it's before New Year's Eve, so maybe you're watching this video late, maybe it's 2026, I don't know. Happy whenever it is for you. I'm Thomas Frank Carr here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Penn State got 2 commits this week, 2 days before Christmas, and we're going to be talking about those players today. Now, normally I would have some co-hosts here to discuss these, the experts on the journey for these players to join the Nittany Lions. We're going to be talking about Mason Bandhauer and Pete Eglitis, 2 Iowa State commits who flipped over to the Nittany Lions right before Christmas. But, it is that time of year where people are scattered to the wind. We're not in our normal routines, so just the schedules the way they are, time off the way it is. I was off before Christmas. Everyone's off after Christmas, so you get me here on a Friday to talk about these 2 offensive linemen, and we're doing 2 of them at the same time in this video. So normally you get the storyline of, hey, where'd they come from? What do they do? What do their coaches say? What does everyone else say about these players? And, Ryan and Fitz's opinions on them as athletes, etc. And then you get my film breakdown, the second half of a video. That's how it normally go. Well, you're going to get double dose of film eval, and I'm going to do my best to fill in some of the gaps in terms of what we know about these players. I'll put my Ryan and my Fitz hat on as best I can throughout the video. So, a lot to get to today. Let's start with a guy closer to home, if you're here in Happy Valley. That'd be Pete Eglitis. He is a 6'7", 295-pound offensive tackle from Columbus, Ohio. He is from Bishop Watterson High School, the 1500th player in the On3 industry ranking. He's a 3-star offensive lineman. At a certain point, like the AI ranks itself. I don't know if it's AI or if it's just a computer program, an algorithm, whatever. Rivals has him as the 104th offensive tackle in the nation, 64th overall player from Ohio. He is a 6'7", 295-pound offensive lineman. And, here's the thing. We're going to start in... This is going to be both the information and a little bit of film analysis where Bishop Watterson is a powerhouse Catholic school in Columbus on their level of competition. I'm looking up their schedule this year, and I was watching the film. Nobody challenged them as a team, and nobody challenged Pete Eglitis as an offensive lineman at all in this process. Their closest game was 14-13. They won over Middletown on August 30th. They also have a game where they won 81-7. So this is an absolute steamroller of a team. Special teams, offense, defense, doesn't matter. This is an excellent football team compared to their competition, their talent level, and there wasn't really a lot of comparison for Eglitis in his competition. Now, as far as the player, took an official visit to Iowa State and Louisville early in the process, and then obviously committed to Iowa State. Decommitted and then flipped to Penn State 2 days before Christmas. So he is here. And let's get into just what he does as a football player. I'll throw on the highlights for you. Here's the thing about him. 6'7", and between these 2 players, you might say he is the tackle between the 2. I would say, the length numbers here, I don't know how to verify these at this point. He's listed at 6'7". He could be 6'6". He could be 6'5 3/4. He's huge. And again, the comparable size, there's not anybody that he's going to be competing against the next level that I see him playing against consistently. So there's not really necessarily a good comparison to give you the facts about his actual measurements. Arm length looks good, but I think more from a physical perspective, he is a guard. He is a powerful run blocker and actually a really good football player. When you look at the way he's taught his technique, his hand usage is excellent. You see it there on film where he's aware of his hands. He uses hand fighting techniques. He's got a really strong chop move. But my concern would be watching him pass block. You see right here, he has really good control, right? So 6-inch step is what they call the offensive lineman, that you don't want to take a step that takes you out of balance. And he's very cognizant of that balance. But at the same time, you don't ever see him really open up his stride, even in space. He's not a guy that's going to be getting out in space, running, athletic. And from what I've seen of Iowa State's offensive line commits, they very much like Phil Trautwein did at Penn State previously. Ryan Clanton likes tackle-sized tackles and tackle-athletic tackles. So 6'6" plus, ability to set the edge both right and left. There's no designation. So I don't see necessarily some of those aspects from Eglitis, but I do see a guy that's big. I think his hips are good enough to swivel and seal off edges in the run game. You can see him able to hit his blocks a lot of what I see is a guy who's able to hit his blocks. Now, some of the athletic things, I think he plays a little bit too high, and his movement skills, he doesn't open up his hips a whole lot. So, mobility, athleticism, the size isn't a problem. It's going to be reshaping. I don't think he has a lot of bad body weight, but just reshaping his athletic profile to give him a little more flexibility and a little bit more pad level, both in the run game and as an athlete. You can see when he pulls, he stands pretty straight up as an athlete. Now, that being said, there's a lot of good, and it may sound like I'm coming off in a negative way, but I just think he's a guard. What I'm trying to describe to you is I think he's a big, mauling guard on the right side of the offensive line for the Nittany Lions in the future, and for Ryan Clanton, I would put him at that position. Now, again, a lot of this is without comparison of players that are his size and athleticism. I haven't seen him be tested on the edge. He never lost, to be clear. He never lost in any of the 4 games I watched. And again, he won 46-7 in one game in which there were 2 kick returns for touchdowns. So there's not a whole lot of challenging him on film. So there's, as the caveat as always, I could be wrong. He could be able to play right tackle. I definitely don't think he's a left tackle necessarily. But there's more of an interior profile as a tall guard, as long as he can work on that flexibility and he can work on his ability to pull and be dynamic in the run game, because Iowa State likes their linemen to be able to move. Doesn't matter where they are on the offensive line. They want guys that can run. Those zone systems, some of the pulling that they like to do on the edge and the perimeter, very similar to what Penn State was just doing under Andy Kotelnicki. Those are going to be important things. So he's not going to get out of being athletic by playing on the inside. But I think his athleticism and the way he moves, his control, his power, I think all of those play much better on the interior than on the outside. So for Penn State fans, this is not one where I'd hope he's 6'8". He's going to accidentally, he's measured the wrong way. 6'6", I think, would be better. I get nervous with tall guards. I think that especially when you play upright like he does, you have an opportunity a lot of times to lose blocks just on the interior. Defensive tackles are typically shorter, and they're able to submarine inside, get on inside shoulders. But as far as an offensive lineman, really good technical blocker. And I think as a pass protector, he's going to be able to anchor. He's going to be able to do things in the pass protection game to make him very difficult to beat. So that's Pete Eglitis for you here as our first offensive lineman. We'll get into Mason Bandhauer in just one second. In football and in finance, having a strong game plan makes all the difference. AJ Freedom Financial helps individuals build personalized financial strategies that align with their goals, timelines, and risk tolerance. From investment guidance and retirement planning to 401k rollovers, HSA assistance, and legacy and wealth strategies, AJ Freedom Financial offers thoughtful, one-on-one support backed by industry experience and a commitment to transparency. Whether you're starting to invest, planning for retirement, or you simply want a second look at your financial approach, AJ Freedom Financial is here to help you make informed, confident decisions. Schedule a no-obligation consultation today at www.ajffi.com. Call 866-383-6899 or email info@ajffi.com. Again, that's ajffi.com. Call 866-383-6899 or email info@ajffi.com. AJ Freedom Financial, helping Nittany Lions fans plan for what's next. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Gradient Securities, LLC. Arden Hills, Minnesota, 866-991-1539. Member FINRA, SIPC. Gradient Securities, LLC, and SEC registered investment advisor, offers investment advisory services under the DBA of Gradient Wealth Management. Gradient Securities, LLC, and its advisors do not render tax, legal, or accounting services. Insurance products and services offered through AJ Freedom Financial. AJ Freedom Financial and Freedom Financial Insurance, LLC are not affiliated with Gradient Securities, LLC. So let's talk about our next offensive lineman, Mason Bandhauer. This one's an interesting one because he's listed anywhere between 6'6", 295 and 6'5", 260 over the last year. I know Ryan put him at the most recent evaluation, I think, from the Iowa State signing day was 6'6", 295. Watching him on film, he seems like he could be anywhere in between. And this is another one where it's interesting. If we talk about, I try not to compare, but it's hard not to when you have two players at two positions that are similar. 3-star here, but a little bit different. I'm going to actually play this again just for the podcast audience so you can hear me read these things. But if you're listening on the YouTube channel, you can see it all for yourself. 790 fifth in the industry ranking, 59th offensive tackle, 11th overall player in Colorado, Mason Bandhauer from Fort Collins, Colorado. So here's the comparison of if you've got a guy like Pete Eglitis who is in Columbus, Ohio, and he's 6'7". Doesn't matter what level of competition, he's going to get scouted. He's going to get some eyeballs on him. Now, if you're in Fort Collins, Colorado, as a 6'5" offensive lineman with a similar situation of never being tested, being the most athletic guy, clearly being a Division I talent, again, playing against a bunch of non-Division I talent players, you might get overlooked. And I think that that's where we are with Mason Bandhauer. Some of the interesting things about him as far as his journey to Penn State, I think, in this kind of, is he an overlooked 3-star offensive lineman? Boston College, Kansas State, Kansas, Mississippi State, Nebraska, and Oklahoma State all interested in him before he committed very early in the process to Iowa State back in October of 2024. So, Boston College known for their offensive linemen. K-State is a very good Big 12 program from a overall fundamental program in terms of like they invest in the trenches on both sides of the ball. The program is what it is, but they're a program that is, I think, more Big Ten-esque than most of them. I think Iowa State and Kansas State are two that you would put in that category. And of course, Nebraska, Big Ten school interested. So just some of the background here on what he is and how he operates from that kind of story perspective. His dad, Todd, was a legacy. He is a legacy. His dad, Todd, played quarterback for Iowa State back in the 90s. So a guy who committed early to the program under Matt Campbell and Ryan Clanton makes sense, kind of putting all the pieces together, because when you watch the film, I really like him. I think he's a talented offensive lineman and a guy that fits what Penn State has been looking for regularly over the last couple of years from an offensive lineman. And before they were kind of hitting their stride under Phil Troutwine, where they're getting 6'6", 6'8", 6'7" offensive tackles, this would be the profile for a football player that Penn State would get, a 6'5"-ish offensive lineman that could play all 5 positions. And I think that is a potential for him to play all 5 positions, from center to guard to tackle, depending on what those length measurements are. And again, this is one of those situations where if I knew the length, I'd say, yeah, there's a great opportunity for him to play tackle, because he's very athletic and explosive in his movement skills. You look at the way he pops off the line of scrimmage, his pass protection, his violence, his explosiveness, his ability to get out and run. All these things look like a Penn State offensive lineman. So I think that there's an aspect of he's a good football player, but he's very raw, much more raw than Eglitis is. But the upside is clearly there for a guy that is either 6'6", 295, or he's 6'5", 270, 280, let's say at this point. And one thing that I know he talked about is he wanted to get into the weight room at Iowa State, and he wanted to get in there and work on getting into his, into the weight program. And I think the comparison I would make for Penn State fans is he's the 3-star Javen Williams. So a guy who's explosive, who's violent and dominant at his level, but the underlying strength characteristics, so lower body strength, power, like the actual how much weight you can lift versus how quickly you can move your own weight to create force. I think he's got some development there. So he profiles to me as a very well-rounded run blocker with a lot of upside in pass protection. Now, talking about some of the technique, he does not have a great 6-inch step. He does not have a really controlled game. Just some little details here. I'm just going to get into the nitpicking because I think it's interesting from a technique perspective, and I do think it takes into account like how long it would take him to transition to the next level from a IQ standpoint of like what he doesn't know. So dad was a football player, but dad was a quarterback, not like a legacy of offensive lineman. Keeps his hands really low in pass protection. So like that's going to keep him at a disadvantage if he's not engaging his hands correctly as a pass protector and as a run blocker. But when you look at what he does on film, I think his pass sets are really good. So you see him anchor really well, and it's not just that he's holding guys off at the point of attack. That's not what I'm looking for when it comes to high school football players. What I'm looking for is like, are you doing it the right way? Because obviously, if you're going to be a Penn State commit, you're going to be succeeding more than you're failing. For the most part, like there's been some guys that didn't over the years, and we've talked about those guys as best we can here on the channel. But he sits into his pass stance really well, meaning to me he's got the core flexibility and the hip flexibility to have his weight centered over the middle of his foot, which means he's able to anchor while also keeping upright and using his maximum length. I know it's very hard to describe. I'm not doing a good job describing it, but basically he's got the right pass profile as a guy who, like, his body position is all correct. So the athleticism is there. It's just the upside and the technique and the weight and all those things have to come. So I think this is a really good example of Iowa State doing a great job of looking through the under-recruited guys and finding somebody who, this would be a Penn State football player from a profile perspective of a 3-star with upside and room to grow while also not being a total lottery ticket. I think there's some things on film that make you think, okay, this guy is going to be a high floor guy at the next level. And I think the difference and the thing I'm excited to see how he develops is which position is that? Because ideally, let's talk about what is ideal for Penn State. So now we're going to talk about the roster as a whole and kind of blend in some of the other things going on. If they can keep their tackles, so, Garrett Sexton, Egan Boyer, I even throw Javen Williams in there as a guy who's athletic enough to play tackle. We've seen that here. Owen Alasini, like the depth at tackle that we've talked about here on these videos even over the last couple of years, keep some of those guys, and then both of these players that we talked about today, they kick to the inside, because Eglitis, I think, could be a power run blocker and can accentuate with just massive size across the line if you can be in a situation where he plays guard. And then you look at Bandhauer. This is a guy that if he plays guard, I think he reaches his highest ceiling, where NFL is a potential in his future if he's playing that left guard position. Because athletically, even though I think pass protection is important no matter where you line up, doesn't matter right or left anymore, there still is that right-handedness in the run game where offensive line coaches still put their most powerful run blockers on the right side and their best pass protectors on the left to guard the blind side of the quarterback. And that's what Mason Bandhauer looks like. He looks like a prototypical 6'5", 310-pound left guard that's a pass blocker and also a good run blocker. This guy that's going to be a zone blocker. He's going to fit into a lot of different schemes with the potential of being a good run blocker, although I don't know that that's going to be his calling card at the next level. He's going to be an athlete who seals off run blocking lanes and is able to get to the second level and just always hit his mark. Maybe he's not dominating in double teams and not a Venga Ioane, if that makes sense. So that is where I think this works out best for Penn State, because we talked about it even before the class of 2026 blew up, that Penn State had a lot of need at guard when you looked at the roster proper in this past year and looked at the future. They had done a really good job at tackle, but a lot of those guys maybe were going to be tackle onlys. These guys have the versatility to play inside, so if you keep the band together, you could kick these guys inside. If they have to play on the outside, I think there's a path for them to do that, but I'm not as confident about that being, okay, these are plus starters in the Big Ten if they're out on an island playing left and right tackle. At the same time, length numbers, athleticism numbers, they're all, TBD. So, don't want to be too definitive at this point in their career without some of those numbers and metrics that we're used to giving you. So when it comes to Penn State flipping these guys, and we talked about this in a broader picture of the Iowa State evaluation process of, you should be very confident they're finding good athletes, receivers, corners, safeties, things like that, running backs. Those are easier to find than it is to find athletic big men that go under the radar. And I think to a degree that's what these guys are here with Mason Bandhauer and with Pete Eglitis. So that'll do it today. Make sure you like and subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. We are going for the next marker here on our journey towards 25,000 or 30,000 or dominating the world in terms of viewership on YouTube, which is, a very aggressive and expansive idea of we're going to just dominate this particular area is the goal. And of course, if you're listening on our podcast version, please give us a 5-star review, subscribe to our YouTube feed so you don't miss anything, because like we just said at the beginning of the show, it is the holiday season. Things are going to be a little bit sporadic. If you're watching this the day it comes out, 9 a.m. for our tailgate show on Saturday for the Pinstripe Bowl. Then we'll be back on Monday to recap everything Tuesday and then Friday. That'll be our schedule for the coming week. So, or if you're listening at any point in the next week, there you go. You know when to find us next. And always the best thing to do, subscribe and enable notifications so you get a little dinger on your phone that comes up when we go live. All right, we'll be back very soon here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. I'm T. Frank. Have a happy holidays. We'll talk to you again soon.